Hello everybody and welcome back to Pravus Gaming and more Democracy 3 in Greece, playing at maximum difficulty. We are going into year 7 now out of 8, which means we are in the final stretch. You'd like to think that this is going to be a downhill run from here, but no. We are one minor disaster away from failure. The water shortage is gradually increasing food prices. And I'm doing everything I can to try and acquire some farmland to make that a little bit better, but that's going to take some time. So, now that we have a surplus of 55 billion euros per quarter, we are going to have to start investing very heavily in the Climate Adaptation Fund. Fortunately, we actually have a pretty reasonable amount of money to make it work. So that's good. The worst thing that can happen right now is an economic downturn. Refugee crisis. That was the second worst thing that could possibly have just happened. Immigration goes way up. The downside of that is private housing costs might be about to skyrocket. They're pretty darn high, I'm not gonna lie. Thank God we passed the mortgage tax relief when we did. There's a hidden modifier that I think might be staving off a housing bubble. Although it could still happen. Could totally still happen. The day is young. Very young indeed. Alright, let's go to the public services and find the Climate Change Adaptation Fund. The thing that you always will need to fund at some point in the game. Again, I really dislike clones and drones for this exact reason. But eventually, the game really does become all about getting enough money to actually fund this beast long-term to try and get as much time as possible. Which means it's impossible to go for a small government libertarian low-tax approach. You have to really just soak up all the money for all it's worth. So yeah, we're going to have to go for a long-term prediction system. Now, this can reduce the water shortage by 18.3%, which is good for now. Unemployment going down is not actually good in this case. We do want a healthy amount of unemployment in order to encourage labor mobility within the market. At some point, this actually reduces productivity and starts skyrocketing wages, which a lot of people look at growing wages and think, oh, that's a good thing. Well, yeah, but like any bubble, at some point it can burst and has a lot of unintended consequences. You know, if we had unemployment completely gone and everyone was completely employed, then wages would go so high that employers would have to start raising their prices for all their goods and services, which basically triggers hyperinflation, which means the wages don't go very far, and now you're spiraling toward your economic death. So, yeah, not always a good thing to get low unemployment. I don't know what the exact rate is. There's some economists who debate that subject, but there is a healthy amount. Right now, we're kind of going down towards zero, which could be a problem. But the water shortage is a bit more important. Unemployment will sort itself out if there is a general strike. Everyone goes away from work, which means the economy shuts down, and in 6 months, the entire planet heals. Because that's how it works in Democracy 3. Go figure. All right, now in order to continue getting our surplus so we can continue paying off all of our debt, we are going to have to raise up the carbon tax. This has a double whammy effect. If we raise it up, not only do we get some more money, but the GDP actually goes down, which, believe it or not, counterintuitively, is good for us right now. The economy is too hot. We need to slow it down so it doesn't continue to destroy the environment so that we can fix the climate problems, so we can fix the water shortage, so food prices can go down so nobody dies or goes on a strike. I'm not sure which one is worse at this point. This is going to upset everyone, which is terrible. But it will overall get money, apply a lot more of the burden of paying for the climate upon the people who are actually causing the problem. And, yeah, slowing down the economy can be a good thing for us right now. The economy is still growing, but this should slow it down to about stopping here. I'm actually pretty good with the GDP stopping and capping out here. I do not want to go to the max. It would be too much. Too much, I tell you. Good news is we seem to have evened out the environment a little bit thanks to the pollution controls, and as the GDP goes down, this should start to gradually improve. So, yeah. Water shortage, we should see from now on, starts going down. Within about a year, it should go away. And in the meantime, we have enough of a surplus so we can pay for that entire program, which is great, because it is a very quick way to go into a debt crisis. If you don't have a surplus by the time you get to a water shortage, and you have to fund the freaking climate prediction stuff all the way to max in order to get rid of it, which, by the way, you do. Anything less than max when you already have a water shortage pretty much won't do it. You will get, like, several hundred billion euros of debt, and you will just go into a debt crisis. It's terrible. The other thing we can go ahead and do as far as the environment, since we're thinking about it, we can max out the recycling to universal doorstep collection. Environmentalists like this, which is good because they're going to become a major voting bloc, but also the environment goes up by another 3%, a little less, for really not a lot of money and very little political capital, which is exactly what I'm looking for in a time like this. So That's all looking pretty solid. Debt has been steadily going down, which I am quite happy about. The global economy is actually taking a slight downturn, but my relative GDP is now above average in the global economy. I'm a proper Western democracy, you know, with a AAA credit rating and everything. It's amazing how in only 7 years we've completely turned everything around. All right, so the organized crime is still gradually ticking away thanks to the witness protection program. Alcohol abuse, we are going to have to do something about this, but honestly, it's such a low priority. I mean, it does make everything involving healthcare more expensive. When people abuse alcohol, turns out not good for your body. Not good at all. Interesting. If it really does impact state healthcare costs by up to 16%, and I have no idea where the developer gets this number, I'm sure it's based on something. But if there really is affecting it by 16%, there is actually a very strong economic argument to actually just ban alcohol entirely. For the sake of the collective good and the public health. That's hilarious, actually. Well, we're not going that far. Maybe next year. Yeah, I'll have just enough time to, like, raise up restrictions to be completely strong restrictions, get everyone to get off of their hit within, like, 3 months, and then we'll just lower it back down to an age 21. We'll come back to that another time, though. Let's move on into the next turn. By the way, I am about to go on a vacation, which I am quite excited about, so we'll have enough time to finish off this series and maybe something else, but keep in mind that next week we might be a little bit scarce on some videos. I'm seeing how much I can record before I leave. But I also could use a break, and my voice is going to get shot if I keep recording for 6 hours straight, which is what I did last night. Landmine ban. An engineering company in our country has won a contract to manufacture and supply landmines for foreign countries. At the moment, there is no specific law that prohibits the company from making these products, but there is widespread public debate about whether we should ban the production of landmines within our borders. So landmines cause civilian deaths. There's no way we should condone the manufacture of such weapons. They're a crude weapon dating back to the First World War, and there's no justification for the use today. If banning the weapons costs us jobs, that's a price we're happy to pay. Or, it's very easy to say we should ban the manufacture of landmines, but what next? Stop making guns, handcuffs? This would be a step towards dismantling our whole arms industry, which would cost jobs and hurt investor confidence. It is not the job of the state to interfere with what a product a company manufactures. I'm kind of okay with that option, I suppose, in this case. It makes sense from the capitalist perspective. I'm trying to decide if this is going to upset the liberals, which it probably will. But we really need to make capitalists happy, and it's pretty rare to find anything that does make them happy. They're a snobby bunch, you know. So, yeah, we're going to reject the law. I do agree that landmines are a very antiquated weapon system. And really, no good civilized nation probably should use them. Unless it were like some sort of a guerrilla warfare situation. But yeah. It's just not, it's just very crude. It's like having a gun, but wearing a blindfold when you pull the trigger. You don't know who you're going to kill with something like that. There's no accountability, really. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of something like that. Anyway, foreign relations, quite high. Turns out, giving money to people makes them like you. Racial tension is very low, despite the fact that our immigration rate should be relatively high. Oh my god. Yes, it is. Okay, good. That's fun. Foreign trade is not amazing right now. Everything's looking okay over there. All right, I was just kind of curious how things are looking. Immigration gets too high, problems ensue. Alcohol abuse is, interestingly enough, still going down. And I'm not too sure what we did to deserve that. Asthma epidemic has actually taken a downturn here, and part of that is because the environment appears to be improving, which is great. Tax evasion, nothing we're ever going to be able to do about that. Water shortage, just starting to eke down. The more we can invest in the environment, the better. And to that extent, one thing that we will want to do is probably get people to use their cars a lot less, which is already going down. We can make that even better, though, if we go for, let's say, better bus usage. This still gets people around, but it reduces the use of rail, which is expensive and causes pollution, and the cars. So try to fit as many people into one vehicle as possible, and to that extent, what we could do... Okay, there's actually a few different things we need to consider here. By the way, what is this doing here? Why is that not an apostrophe? Explain that to me. No one knows! Anyway, free bus passes. Now, bus subsidies would work pretty well. Bus passes are cheaper, but also get people to use a lot of bus usage. Here's the other fun thing. If we pass this, it increases poor earnings. That is incredibly important to me right now, believe it or not. In fact, we may want to invest a lot more in poor earnings right now. The reason being, food prices have been skyrocketing. The higher they go, the lower the poor earnings start to get. Gets low enough, guess what? We have a general strike on our hands. Only bad things can possibly happen from here. So, to that extent, I want some policies that specifically increase poor earnings, which includes the free eye tests. So by doing this, we can actually increase it by a good 9.2%. And most importantly, this happens instantly, next turn. We don't have to wait like 10 years, so that's good. Capitalists don't like it, the wealthy don't like it, because they're fitting the bill for some eye tests. Okay, kind of sucks. But health goes up, poverty goes down, poor earnings goes up. That's important. That's incredibly important. At a time when we're about to have a food crisis, freeing up as much money for the poor to stay fed is incredibly important to us right now. The other thing we could do is go to, I think, legal aid. No, that's jury trial. Legal aid? Yes, this also increases poor earnings. Not by much, but it does so instantly, which right now I would say is a worthwhile investment. The other thing I'll do as far as the environment is we might want to go for the Hybrid Cars Initiative. This and the Electric Cars Initiative are two things that I tend to overlook, but they actually are very, very good. Electrical cars greatly improves the environment. So does Hybrid Cars Initiative. Only reason I'm going to go for the hybrid first is because it's a lot cheaper. But we may end up wanting to do both. Both are quite good, and I'll show you what I mean. So oil demand goes down because guess what? We have hybrids, which means that we are consuming less gas and relying more upon electricity, which is great. Now, here's the one thing I think is hilarious about hybrids, and I don't know the exact math on some stuff, but people tend to think that hybrids and electric cars are like the solution of the future. Yes, they don't produce a lot of CO2 on their own because they're not using a lot of fuel. Great, okay, I like that too. However, do keep in mind that the greater electrical consumption you have, the more you're going to have to operate your power plants, which means more CO2 coming from those as well. Unless you have some really, really powerful clean energy initiatives like hydroelectric dams and stuff like that, which right now I would say is still not cost-effective enough, though there have been some pretty good strides. My solution, and this tends to get some flack from people, is freaking nuclear technology. Nuclear reactors, yes, produce some byproducts and waste. I would rather deal with that problem, but they produce monumental amounts of electricity for relatively cheap, and believe it or not everyone's Homer Simpson. It's actually a bit safer than people give it credit for. There are some things that can happen. Yes, we should keep in mind, like the Fukushima power plant. You know, these things are important, but it does produce a lot less CO2 while still meeting our energy needs. That's really important to me because as people try to find ways to reduce CO2 and get cleaner energy, you know, that's all well and good, but if the result is that it makes electricity so expensive it becomes cost prohibitive, you've reduced human quality of life so much, like I just don't see that as a tenable solution. You know, we can't go back to the 1600s in order to heal the planet. We're going to have to find a way to do both. To me, nuclear technology has always been a really good way to do that. Also, move toward fusion development if you can. Fusion research, that's pretty cool. But we're not going to get that anyway. So that's my little bit there. But yeah, so the Hybrid Cars Initiative does end up improving the environment a little bit by reducing... No, wait, car usage goes up. But the environment goes up. There we go. I was going to say, this does improve the environment, yes, by a whopping 7.5%. So even though car usage goes up, it's not so bad. We already have bus passes to offset that a bit. But with the environment going up over only 8 turns by 7%, I consider that pretty good. And it is remarkably cheap. The other reason you might want to consider Hybrid Cars Initiative is in the occasional scenario where oil demand actually is starting to cripple your economy. That does sometimes happen with oil prices skyrocketing. If you have very high oil demand here and very low oil supply, you'll find the prices go up, and that can cause a lot of problems for your GDP. Motorists start to get really upset. Food prices can become a problem. There's a lot of issues with that. So you do want to keep that in mind. It is one option to try and reduce the demand for the oil and make things a little bit better. Just a wee little bit better. All right, let's move on. Now, I don't think there's much else I need to do right now in order to continue improving the environment. I think we're more or less in a pretty good spot. Corporate manslaughter. A new bill is proposed to allow a corporate entity to be prosecuted for manslaughter when they have been found guilty of negligence resulting in loss of life. Interesting. How would you defend this? This law is necessary to deter companies from cutting corners when it comes to the safety of their employees and members of the public. Too many people die every year in industrial accidents, and often there are no lessons learned and no blame apportioned. This law will be a step forward for corporate responsibility. Doesn't seem unreasonable to me. This law is unenforceable. With large companies employing many subcontractors, the legal complexities involved in applying blame for accidents are considerable. This law may be well-intentioned, but its practice will be an expensive waste of time that serves to line the pockets of lawyers, whilst failing to achieve any real change in corporate behavior. I kind of, even as a free market capitalist, kind of lean a bit to this, where if somebody's actions or their lack thereof leads to your direct harm, it could be something they are liable for. It depends a lot on context, right? There are times when people just don't use the equipment as directed, and as a result, they get hurt. But that's not the sort of situation I think that the corporate manslaughter bill would really apply. That comes to, like, incredibly lax safety standards that, you know, result in negligence and somebody getting hurt. I'm going to block it anyway because I want to make the capitalists happy, but it does make some sense to me. I think the people it upsets the most in this case are going to be trade unionists. Yeah. That was to be expected, though, and they're not an important demographic to me, whereas capitalists, with 77% of the population, that's a little bit important to me. Just a wee little bit important to me. And in fact, let's find other ways to start making these guys happy, because I do want to start winning over their favor. Also, I have a bit of a surplus, even with the water shortage in full swing, which is a pretty good thing for me right now. So, let's reduce, let's say, the capital gains tax. 45% is absurd. Not happy with this. We're going to reduce it down to something reasonable, like 15%. That's going to sacrifice a few billion euros per quarter. The GDP will go up slightly, and inequality goes down, but capitalists will be a heck of a lot happier as a result, and high earnings go up, which is not so bad. And also important, the self-employed will be quite happy, socialism goes down, wealthy will be happier, and tax evasion starts to go down as well. We have so many different taxes, you know, why have the capital gains tax? I mean, sure, I'm still using an income tax and a flat tax that's just taxing people to all hell, but we can at least reduce the taxes on the people who invest, basically the very wealthy, right? No one will be upset by that. No one will be upset at all. It's fine. I actually do think that the capital gains tax needs to be relatively low. I've actually wondered sometimes, because I know one criticism that a lot of people have is that a billionaire like Warren Buffett, for example, can have a lower effective tax rate because he gets most of his money from, let's say, capital gains, which is a lower tax rate than the income tax would have been for his income bracket. So some people have criticisms about that. I'm not sure how much of that's getting convoluted in terms of, like, some misleading data. It could very well be the case. But assuming that's all true, I have wondered if there are ways to break up the capital gains tax in such a way that it's low for people to continue investing, because I do want to see the middle class investing, because that's a very good way to grow your wealth. Investing is the key to retirement and becoming wealthy. It really is. You don't just happen into it. You don't become a movie star. It's through diligent, careful investing and saving. So encouraging that is a good thing, and a low capital gains tax does that. Also, investment can be very good for economic growth because it's getting invested into new startup businesses and so on. That stuff can be really good. Better for 401ks, which means you need to rely less on a state pension. A low capital gains tax rate can be a good thing, but do you find a way to break that up for the people whose income is exclusively from capital gains, right? What happens when you get to a point where you have tens of millions of dollars and you don't need to work a job anymore? All you have to do is throw it into a trust fund and do investments, and then boom, you're wealthy. Is that something you want to encourage, or is that something where you should have a high tax rate that applies to them specifically because it is their main source of income? Now, I would argue probably not, but I have been curious to see if there are any mechanisms to make that work in such a way that it does tax people who are basically cross that magical threshold where they just become super rich and just keep getting richer because the capital gains tax is so low and they don't need to work. Or is there another way to do it? I don't know. It's something I've always wondered about. I'm not sure exactly that I would support it. It's an interesting thought experiment, and I'd like to know a bit more about it. Anyway, okay, so that's done. We're going to make the capitalists a lot happier. The other people we need to make happy are the liberals, because they are a little bit peeved at me at the moment, in part because of the farmland acquisition. Well, one thing we can do is finally pass those art subsidies again, since we did get rid of those before. It's not too expensive. It's reasonable. We can do this. It'll make the liberals a lot happier. Yeah, it'll upset some capitalists, but I lowered your capital gains tax rate, okay? Shut up. It'll be fine. Foreign relations goes up, tourism goes up, which is good for the economy, education goes up, unemployment, and then there is the liberalism. So we'll go ahead and do that now, since we had intended to do that a while ago. How's the unemployment right now, by the way? It did tick up a little bit, which I find interesting. The increased immigration is actually increasing unemployment, which is good for us right now. This is one of those times, by the way, if you are at a point where you have an incredibly low unemployment rate and it's starting to have negative drags on your economy, that is one of the times where you may want to consider increasing immigration. I've talked about it before, but I do think that immigration is a net good thing, but there is such a thing as too much in terms of social cohesion, and there's such a thing as too little in terms of economic growth. Finding the balance is important. That unemployment number is one of the key market indicators you should be watching to know when you should be increasing your immigration. Also, what types of immigration? You know, do you want to have family-based, or do you want to have merit-based? Merit-based having the advantage of going to specific sectors of your economy that you know need the help the most. Those could be good things as well. I don't know. A lot of things to consider. All right, so now we're actually in a really solid spot, and I'm not sure what else to do. I'm actually not sure. Can we raise the alcohol law? Darn it! Not quite. We're almost there, but not quite. Could we go for... One thing we could do is go for, I don't know, actually, and I'm just trying to think. Something fun. Compulsory language lessons? That's pretty good, because one thing I'd like to see doing... Actually, okay, here's a really good argument. Okay, food prices are going up, yes? Poor earnings are just terrible. Thank God we're staving it off a little bit, but it's terrible. We have to deal with this. One way you can help with it is improving international trade. More international trade means that we can import more food in order to try and keep food prices as low as possible. Cost of living, man, it is important. People forget about this. Wages can go up, but if cost of living goes up right along with it, it does nothing for you. You know, one of the advantages of being in the United States right now, yes, some people will be like, oh, these countries in Europe have higher salaries per capita. Yes, okay. What's your cost of living? Oh, it's a lot higher. Well, there you go. In the United States, we actually have a relatively low cost of living in terms of food and other basic necessities. Housing and medical, those are the things that can get kind of crazy here. But anyway, yeah, so increasing international trade would be a fantastic thing to do right now. And one thing we could do to that end is, well, diplomatic service won't do much for us. We already have, like, the, I think we already have, like, the trade councils and stuff, and that's all good. So really the only other thing we can do is try to encourage people to learn foreign languages so we can increase our international trade. And a compulsory language lesson, for example, can do that. That could be pretty good for us, and it's actually very cheap. It does cost a fair chunk of political capital, but it's not absolutely terrible. So, okay, we can try doing that next turn. Any other things that I really want to work on? We could actually go ahead and do the electric cars initiative now. And you know what? I think I will. It costs $4 billion, but we have the surplus. Let's do it. Oil demand goes down. CO2 emissions goes down. The environment goes up by 8.58%. It takes 16 turns. So we're not going to see the full effect of this, but we are going to fully ban all gas-powered cars in our country. This is going to upset motorists a lot. And we may want to consider passing some new car subsidies in order to help people buy new cars. But I do hope that this is going to see the environment start spiking up, which will give us the freedom that we need to improve the GDP. More importantly, we're going to start seeing the water shortage continue to go down. All right, let's move on into the final turn of year 7. I think we will go for, oh, a mortgage rate rise. That scares me. That is the sign of something dangerous possibly going to happen. As far as the housing bubble, I really hope it doesn't. Oh boy. All right, let's go to the compulsory language lessons. We're going to do this now. We are going to reduce racial tension. Don't care about that. Foreign relations, international trade, 9.32%. Immigration goes up, but it's already at the max, so that's not going to hurt us. Education goes up, which can only be a good thing. Patriots aren't happy because they're being forced to learn another language. Hey, by the way, double comma, another typo. I'm telling you, I got an eye for these things. Find them everywhere. All right, but international trade over the next 8 turns will go up by 9.32%. We'll try using that to offset some of the food prices, but good God, it is starting to scare the ever-loving hell out of me. Water shortage, man, you're getting close. You're close. A little bit more, please. Car emission limits, hybrid cars, electric cars, all these things are working to our advantage. If only I could find a way to reduce the GDP a couple percentage points. Maybe, just maybe. Maybe I shouldn't have reduced the capital gains tax. It might have been a mistake. I don't know yet. We'll come back to that, though. This is a good place to end this video. We have a very minor surplus, but we're not in debt. And once the water crisis is done, we will be able to reduce the Climate Adaptation Fund to get all that money back. We do need to deal with the alcohol problems. That will be important for us. But we're so close to being able to get rid of this, but we're on the clock. If we cannot resolve this within the next year, I think we are going to lose the election and therefore the game. So it's going to be a nail-biter, but let's see what happens. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If so, then be sure to hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys next time.